Hello and welcome to Chapter 10, Sharing the Road. This unit will be talking about pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, mopeds, scooters, buses, emergency vehicles, law enforcement, funeral processions, large trucks, equestrian and animal-drawn vehicles, farm machinery, animals, passenger and freight trains. Now we're going to potentially skip around a little bit in this unit, but I thought it was important to touch on a few areas that may be in your testing protocols when you are ready to take the written test at the state of Michigan level. So this one will start at the beginning, as we've always done, with our pre-quiz, chapter pre-quiz. And again, as we've worked on in the units, you're going to answer the question and then you're going to leave me the answer in an email upon completion of this unit. So starting out, number one, as a driver, you have the responsibility to pedestrians that is A, legal, B, moral, C, both A and B are correct, D, neither A or B is correct. Number two, animals are especially dangerous when you see them near the road. A, their size and quick movements. B, they are attracted by vehicle exhaust fumes. C, they have basic fear of vehicles and will always run from them. Or D, they are generally too small to cause any damage to your vehicle if you hit them. Number three, while driving on a 2-lane roadway, you encounter a fire truck coming toward you with its siren and emergency lights on. You should slow but continue in your lane since the truck has the other lane available to drive in. B, maintain your speed and lane position. C, move off the roadway but slow only enough to maintain control of your vehicle. And D, move off the roadway and stop until the fire truck passes you. Number four, what should you do? What should you not do when you see the flashing lights of a police officer behind you? A, let the law enforcement officer know that you see them. B, reduce your speed until you pull over. C, pull over in a safe location. D, reach for any object or into the glove box, console, other closed area or under your seat or down on the floorboard. Sorry, that last letter D is written a little funny, so I struggled with it a little bit. Number five, compared to following a passenger sedan, how far back should you follow a motorcycle? A, closer to the motorcycle. B, farther back from the motorcycle. C, about the same distance as when you're following a passenger sedan. Or D, the length of six motorcycles. Okay, and in this unit, we already reviewed once what we're talking about, but I'll leave it right here for a second for you to see where our units are going. Here we have bicyclists. What are some kinds of roadway users you will encounter? So again, we talked about pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcycles, buses, emergency vehicles. Basically anything other than a pickup truck, a SUV, or a car. So here we have a video that we're going to begin to play. Okay, we're going to come into pedestrians. Sorry, back up on that one a little bit. 3 reasons a pedestrian might be walking on or near the road. They might be walking a dog, catching a bus, crossing a street, or running for exercise. So here we have a bad situation. Anytime motorized vehicles operate near people standing, walking, or running. Why are pedestrians considered vulnerable road users? They do not have protection of a vehicle around them. They are more difficult to see than vehicles. And every time you drive, you must keep your mind and eyes active and search for pedestrians. What are some good rules of thumb to use to protect pedestrians? Drivers have a legal and moral responsibility to protect pedestrians. Give them space. Allow even more time and space than you would for a motor vehicle or bicycle. Never assume anything about a pedestrian, young or old. Most pedestrians imagine they are more visible to drivers than they are. Always yield the right of way to pedestrians. Reduce your speed when pedestrians are nearby. Okay, what should you do to protect pedestrians? So for this one, stop behind the stop line. These are pedestrian crossing areas. We call them elephant trunks in the driver education world. And you can see pedestrians are going to cross here in the stop line or the pedestrian cross line. And of course, we're going to let them cross first. What does it mean if a pedestrian makes eye contact with you? It often means they want to be sure you see them. Never assume they're giving you permission to go ahead of them. Why are young children especially vulnerable? Often they have unpredictable behavior. They can dart into streets without stopping or looking. They may play in or near a street, especially in subdivisions without sidewalks. Pedestrians may be more common in residential areas. Pedestrians may be out exercising in a neighborhood or walking a pet. What kinds of professional pedestrians might wander in your path of travel? Might have meter readers, utility workers, postal workers, delivery persons, trash and recyclable collectors. Unintentional pedestrians are maybe somebody who's mowing their lawn, sweeping the sidewalk. Pedestrians in parking lots before and after an event are likely to not pay close attention to the vehicle traffic. Low visibility pedestrians, bad weather will make pedestrians harder to see than usual. Pedestrians might take extra risk when it's raining, so be prepared. They might be running, looking down while they have an umbrella over them or something like that, so they're not really paying attention to traffic. Impaired pedestrians, alcohol and other drugs contribute to collisions with adult pedestrians. Time of day, location, and behavior can provide clues about whether a pedestrian is affected by alcohol. You can usually see inappropriate behavior such as stumbling, yelling, maybe acting very differently. What should you do if you suspect a pedestrian is impaired? Put more space between your vehicle and the individual. Impairment by alcohol and other drugs does contribute to collisions involving pedestrians. All pedestrians walkers or runners? Who else should you be looking for? Here we have skateboarders, roller skaters, people wearing inline skates, and even hoverboards or wiggle sticks. Anything where a pedestrian's not inside a car, they're considered a pedestrian, simply put. Here, where pedestrians hit and killed by vehicles within crosswalks or outside of intersections. By far, most pedestrians are killed outside of intersections. Many choose to cross mid-block, sometimes quickly entering the road from between parked cars. This makes pedestrians extra difficult for drivers to detect. Just for example, this morning when I had to go out for a few moments, I was working my way back home and I actually almost witnessed a semi-truck hitting a pedestrian. They just came randomly walking across the road, much like this person here, and just about in the same location in the street when the semi-truck came driving through. Thankfully, the semi-truck was going the speed limit and was very aware of their surroundings. They were able to stop, but the pedestrian almost got hit because of the position they were in and not using the sidewalk or crosswalks appropriately. Pedestrians are vulnerable. They are the most vulnerable road users in the highway traffic system. Avoiding collision with a pedestrian at all costs. Try to avoid colliding with a pedestrian at all costs, of course. Always yield the right of way to them at any location. It can also help to think like a pedestrian. This can help you to anticipate their next move. All right, next we're going to move into bicyclists. So why are bicyclists at risk on the road? First question of this unit here. Bicyclists may be greater risk than people walking. Not only are bicyclists not protected by vehicular structure, but move much faster than pedestrians. Thus, they are vulnerable to injury. What natural law is responsible for bicyclists being thrown from their bikes and injured? Momentum. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. Though a bicycle may stop abruptly, often its rider will continue forward at the same speed, flying through the air until they hit a hard object. Who is responsible for visibility of bicyclists? Bicyclists are responsible for making themselves visible to other road users and obeying traffic laws, just as drivers are. Unfortunately, not all bicyclists are responsible road users. Why must drivers remain especially alert and cautious around children who are walking, running, or riding bicycles? Some children may ride erratically on roads before they are old enough to understand the risk without necessary training. What are the rules regarding bicycle lanes? Some roads and streets are marked with dedicated bicycle lanes to keep bicyclists safe, encourage the mode of transportation. Although these lanes should not be used by motor vehicle drivers, it can be necessary for the drivers to cross a bicycle lane as when preparing to turn right in an intersection. Move across the bicycle lane as safely possible. Yield the right of way as appropriate. Is it illegal to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk? In most places, bicyclists over a certain age, for example, 12 years, may not lawfully ride a bicycle on sidewalks. Sidewalks are generally intended to be used by people walking, and bicyclists are considered pedestrians when they walk bicycles. Roadway conditions that can be hazardous to bicycles. So here we have road crossings, potholes, gravel on roadways, steel bars, or grates. So these are steel bars they're showing for a bicyclist. Here the bicyclist does have the right of way on the roadway, so they too need to go around the steel grate, for safety. So here this vehicle in Michigan, this vehicle should not be passing the bicycle in the same lane here, as we need to leave between 3 or 5 foot depending on regulations in that town or area. So this is kind of a illegal picture, I guess, if you will, if a person is changing lanes this close to a bicyclist, as that's not leaving enough room from the edge of the car to the bicyclist. And of course, leaving even less room here if they have to go around the steel grate. Here we can see how much space should you give a bicyclist. And as I talked about a moment ago, they should be given the entire lane. Some jurisdictions have laws requiring drivers to allow at least 3 feet between their bicyclists. And like I said, there are places in Michigan where it's 5 feet. I apologize, I clicked a bad button there. So here we go. We're going to move on to motorcycles, mopeds, and scooters. What are some precautions you should take when following a motorcycle? Why riders of motorcycles and scooters and mopeds are vulnerable on the road? They again do not have the same occupant protection of the enclosed 4-wheeled passenger vehicles. When riders of motorcycles, scooters, and mopeds are involved in crashes, they are at much greater risk of serious injury or death. And unfortunately, some riders do not use all the protective gear available to them. This increases their risk of injury. Though they may look tough on the outside, motorcycle riders are still soft and squishy on the inside, so we don't want to crash them. For motorcycles, how much space should you give a motorcycle, moped, and scooter riders? By the law of the road, they are allowed by law to use as much space on the roads as a car and truck drivers. How much space should you give when passing? When you pass a motorcyclist or another 2- or 3-wheeled vehicle, give the rider the entire width. Search carefully for the motorcyclist every time you change lanes, as motorcycles are narrower and more difficult to see than other vehicles. Motorcycles and scooters can generally stop in a shorter distance, so increase your following distance when driving behind one of these vehicles. A motorcyclist or scooter will respond to highway hazards differently than other drivers. An object in the road is not a hazard for a car driver, may require a motorcyclist to respond evasively. The roadway surface may require a rider to reduce speed. It is important to be aware of how traction affects all vehicles, not only the one you're driving. Regardless of how large or small the motorcycle, moped, or scooter is, the rider is vulnerable for injury. What are some common causes of car-motorcycle crashes? The car driver is often at fault. A passenger vehicle driver fails to yield the right-of-way when turning left across a path of an oncoming motorcyclist. Driver fails to yield the right-of-way when turning right at a red traffic signal or stop sign. It is common for at-fault drivers to say they had not been expecting or hadn't seen a motorcyclist. Always actively search for all possible road users, not just the common ones. Next, we're going to go into buses. How do you know when to stop for a school bus loading and unloading students? I'm going to have you write that answer down, and that'll be given in the email at the completion of this unit. So again, how do drivers know when to stop for a school bus loading and unloading students? How many students ride school buses in the US? Each school day in the United States, approximately 500,000 or 500,000 school buses transport more than 23 million students to and from school. This number includes pre-K through high school. Are school buses safe to ride? School buses are one of the safest form of highway transportation for students. According to NHTSA, on the average, the number of school-age children killed inside a school transportation vehicle each year is between 4 and 6. That is significantly less than 1% of the total number of motor vehicle fatalities each year. In total, students who travel to school on a bus are about 70 times more likely to arrive safely compared to traveling by car. In general, what are some ways you can reduce risk around the school bus? Basics apply everywhere. Slow down when you encounter a school bus. Stop when a school bus is loading or unloading students. When the bus's lights are flashing, stop when a bus is loading or unloading students, and when the bus's red lights are flashing. So these are the red lights up here that they're talking about at the very top of the bus. Some states require drivers outside of business or residential areas to stop for a school bus only when the red lights are on and the bus are flashing, or when driving on the same side of the divided highway in which the bus is traveling. Other locations require drivers to stop for a school bus that is stopped on any roadway. In Michigan, this is called an undivided highway because it just has paint markings. You can see these cars have to stop. All this here is potentially showing grass, or we could use our imagination and say there's concrete here. Here, these cars have to stop. These do not. This would be a divided highway. So it depends on, do you have a barrier in between on who has to stop? Here, everybody has to stop for the school bus stopping and unloading children. Here's a good picture of the flashing lights. We can see the stop sign, the flashing lights, and the lights flashing at the top. Those are the lights to indicate you must stop for a school bus. Another very important sign is our pedestrian crossing sign or our school crossing sign. We can see it's shaped like a house and each individual is carrying a bag. That's how we know that we are in a school zone. Here as well is a school zone, so we know that we have to treat that a little differently. Now, transit buses are a little bit different. These you will find downtown in city areas, potentially just on the outskirts, but they are hauling individuals. In Michigan, we do not have to stop for the bus unless, of course, legal law does not allow us to pass maybe road pavement markings or such like that. You can see here, this bus is just leaving a bus stop area. This car would have been legal to pass down the center lane here, just being very aware of the surroundings and potential pedestrians coming running from this side to catch this bus that only runs potentially every hour or an hour and a half. Here, some cities do have special areas for buses to pull into. We shouldn't be parking in these areas, and this allows the bus to pick up and drop off pedestrians with ease without interfering. And I'm just going to kind of look here. As I said, this unit would be a little more pick and choose of some specific areas, as I did just want to highlight other users on the roadway and make sure you are familiar with that. And I'm just scrolling along here. The next thing we're going to focus on is emergency vehicles. This is pretty important information. So what are some examples of emergency vehicles you will encounter on the road? What kinds of emergencies will they be attending to? So here, some common types of vehicles are ambulance, fire truck, police vehicles, roadside and emergency service providers such as auto club or service vehicles. What should you do in an emergency when an emergency vehicle approaches with a siren and lights flashing? So here we can see the brake lights are coming. Here the lights are flashing. Here the lights are flashing. Drive to a position parallel and as close to as possible as the right edge of the road to clear of the intersection. Stop and remain stopped until the vehicle has passed. If you are in an intersection, move out of the intersection. So here we're going to see this vehicle here, and we've talked about this in a previous unit, so we'll just kind of review. This is an emergency vehicle. This can be a police officer, fire truck, ambulance, or tow truck. Tow trucks usually wouldn't go around in such a way, but maybe they could. They are an emergent event. They count as the same thing. Here you can see this car has a green light. So potentially they should be able to go through and have the clear right of way. Apologize, I clicked a button there. This car has a green light as well, so they would have the clear right of way. However, these sirens tell us we need to give right of way to this emergency vehicle. So you can see this car here has moved over to the right side and stopped, and this car has moved over to the right side and stopped. Now this car, if they were in the intersection further, it is recommended to come across. However, you want to be very aware of where the emergency vehicle is, and they will work through the intersection. In Michigan, I am a licensed emergency provider, so I have a little tidbit of information to say these emergency vehicles need to ask for permission to come through the intersection. And by that, I mean we are to slow at a red light, verify clear, and come through. So we always are looking and working as a team to make sure it's safe, but you should as well be pulling over to the side, stopping, and helping that vehicle come through the intersection. Emergency vehicle on the right. So we want to talk about this just a little bit. Where should you go? Now here, the best possible scenario is we want to warn other drivers behind us by maybe tapping our brakes. We want to communicate, attend a safe lane change. If not possible to do a safe lane change, we want to reduce our speed to at least 20 miles an hour below the speed limit. State law in Michigan is 10 miles below the speed limit, but 20 would give them an increased buffer and keep this individual safe. So ideal situation, we would like to move over a lane. We are to make every attempt to safely move over to a lane. If we absolutely can't make a safe attempt, then please slow down by 20 miles an hour or more and come by this emergency vehicle and give them a chance. If you have an emergency vehicle on the left, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go from the left lane to the center lane if we can safely. If not, slow down 10, 20 or more miles per hour to give them the safe advantage. And here we're going to play a video quick. All right, just a quick little video to ask us to move over if we can. We're going to just talk real quick about funeral processions, as things happen just a little bit differently with them. It is not okay to drive between one. We are paying respects as an outward community to the individual who has passed. They will likely be marked some way. This is a hearse or a vehicle carrying usually a casket or a person who's being carried to a cemetery. A lot of times there'll be a flagging component on these cars that will say funeral, so you know that they're all together. But most of the time, a lot of times what will happen is the person in front will clear away and the person behind will acknowledge that the funeral procession has ended. So again, if you see a funeral procession out there, it could be marked with a flag. It's generally noted with a large group of people close together, and they'll try to stay together. So you want to make every effort to not break in between that and drive at your own need through a funeral procession. Next is going to be large trucks. Okay, why should you use extra caution when traveling near large trucks? Well, because they're big and they have blind spots. So we're going to focus on this one just a little bit, as a lot of individuals don't know some information about these trucks. So first of all, what we're looking at is it common to feel nervous about sharing the road with large trucks? Many drivers, new and experienced, feel nervous when sharing the road with these oversized vehicles. With little knowledge and preparation, it's possible to stay safe. One, we know there's a common weight difference. A weight of 40 tons is not uncommon, or 80,000 pounds. In contrast, the average passenger vehicle weighs about 4,000 pounds. So a large truck that weighs the same as, a large truck or a semi-truck can weigh as much as 20 passenger vehicles, all in one package. Here is an important slide that I wanted to make sure we got out of this unit. So drivers of large trucks tend to have 4 very large blind spots. Those blind spots are up to 200 feet in the back. So if you have a car sitting out in your driveway, I want you to imagine 10 of those lined up, bumper to bumper. So 1 car, 2 cars, 3 cars, 4 cars, 5 cars, and so on. That is the potential of a blind spot of a semi-truck. So if you are right here where this car is, over in this lane, there's a good possibility that truck driver has no idea you're there. We have a 10 to 20 foot blind spot in the front. So here's another thing a lot of individuals don't know. When you pull over and change lanes in front of a truck, if you are close right here, there is an honest potential they cannot see you. There is the potential for them to miss this entire car in front of this truck. So that's why when we tell you, when we're learning to pass, we want to make sure we see at very least both headlights of this truck in our rearview mirror. That's going to make us pass up here in an upwards area out of that 10 to 20 foot area of not being able to see and allow us to be seen by the truck. The driver's side has a little less of a blind spot. However, it's still a potential of another 20 to 40 feet. So again, the whole length of a car could be missed in this area here if the driver doesn't look out his window before changing lanes. The more difficult one is the one on the right side here. And this one again can be 20 to 40 feet over here. So as we notice, potentially 2 whole cars this semi is unable to see on the right side. So all of these yellow areas represent areas of blind spot by a semi truck. So if we're traveling along, we don't necessarily need to speed past a semi truck, as their speed limit is 65 and ours is 70. But we do want to make every effort to come up and make a good strong pass past the truck. Oops, I'm going to go back here. Go past the truck and go on our way. Where we don't want to stand and hang out is we don't want to stay right here traveling along. We want to try not to stay right here traveling along. And if we can help it, try not to stay here either. There's just too big of opportunity for them to not see us, and we want to make sure we're safe. Stopping distances of semi-trucks is enhanced as well. So as we can see, it can take 40% longer to stop. As a truck driver myself, I've heard too many times, oh, they have bigger tires, they have bigger brakes, they can stop faster. That is a total misconception. They have more weight, they're a larger vehicle, and it definitely takes longer for them to stop. Here is a situation forcing a vehicle like a large truck to stop quickly can cause serious and even a fatal crash. So what they're reporting here is potentially this truck had someone cut in front of them and not leave them enough room for stopping. So the truck driver performed an evasive maneuver and ended up rolling over on the side of the highway here. And by cutting off, I mean, you can see this car came over way too soon. This truck driver here potentially has to put in a heavy brake and try to get stopped, and potentially they can't do that. Trucks making left turns. So now we want to talk about big trucks turning. They do not turn as quickly as a car or a pickup truck. They need more room. They need more opportunity. Drivers of passenger vehicles need to stop behind the painted crosswalk or stop bar if a vehicle is making a left turn. If you allow the front end of your vehicle to extend beyond the road markings, your vehicle might be a target for a large truck turning left across your path. Or the truck will end up blocking the entire intersection because you pulled up too far and everyone will be stuck. For right turns, you can see here, this is on the back of just about every vehicle I've ever seen that's a large truck. Large trucks may move a little to the left before turning to the right as they need to swing to make their turn. Passing, so here is the swing we're talking about. Here's a truck trying to turn to the right. They need to swing out and come back in to make this turn. They are not, if the turn is tight, able to just make a nice tight turn like most passenger cars. I'm going to back up just a second here. Oops, actually I'm on the right one. So I'm going to go here. And then wind currents, that's another thing. When it's windy out, it tends to have a little bit of a change. Plus, actually, I'm noticing that our pictures are not lining up here with our words. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So they wanted to talk about wind currents, but now we're talking about extra wide space. So the big takeaway for wind currents, I apologize, stumbling just a little bit. When you're driving down the road next to a big truck, because they are large, they do move wind very quickly. So you might notice that your car kind of wiggles and shakes a little bit. What you're going to do is hold on to the steering wheel with increased grip and just pass your truck, as we said, controlled and within a good speed clip. And you'll just notice that you got to hold on a little bit tighter for that wind. Do not pass a truck on the right. Like we showed those no zones or the low vision zones. If we're at an intersection and the truck has swung out and they have their turn signal on, it likely means they're going to turn to the right. So don't squeeze your car up here because they are in the process of making the turn. They may not see you, one, because you're in their blind spot, and two, they need this room to make the turn. They might run over your car as they make the turn. Here again, we want to allow ample space. This can actually be the picture of your windshield when following a semi-truck on a rainy day. Of course, we have windshield wipers to help for this, but because they have such large tires and so many of them, they tend to really push the water up when it's raining. So here we want to just give ample space and allow him to move forward. If he's going very slow and conditions and warrant allow us to go a little faster, we again want to focus forward. We can kind of see the white line here. Maybe we focus on that as we're driving forward. As you get up in the center of the truck, this water situation will slow a little bit and help you to see better and allow you to pass more with increased safety. Again, we want to try not to pass on the right side of the road if we can help it. There should be a left lane over to the side over there that would allow us to pass with increased safety. And here, just it says, is it okay to start passing the next truck yet? No, the black vehicle ahead is still next to you. So we should stay back here is what I like to point out here. Again, these tires hold about 100 pounds of pressure each. And if they have a malfunction and they explode, that's a danger point. This vehicle here is still in their blind spot. So they're trying to get up and pass this vehicle. If we stay just back here, we're not hurting anything. Oops, I'm going to come back to that. We're not hurting anything. We can stay here. That would allow the truck to make an evasive maneuver if they had to. This vehicle can pass moving forward, and we can all pass safely at the same time. So basically, once this vehicle has passed and gotten to the front of this truck, then we can proceed forward and come through at a nice clip. Here you can see this vehicle is just ahead. So if we're this car here, as we're looking at the picture, we've started to proceed forward and we could again pass the semi at a nice even movement. And again here, this car is actually in a better position than the car previous to it. So we would wait potentially until the car got up here and then we would start to move forward. So as you can see, we really don't want to sit next to the truck. We want to hold out here just a little bit, waiting for the car to move forward. Here it's a little farther forward, so maybe we start moving up next to the truck. But here's the best case scenario. This vehicle is far enough ahead, they could change lanes back, then it could be our turn to make the pass around the truck. I'm going to talk just a little bit about farm machinery. Where I'm from, there's a lot of farm machinery. So we just want to know that these individuals have the right of way just as any other highway user. They may have this sign on the back of their tractor. This is going to tell you that they're a slow moving vehicle, so potentially they won't be going the speed limit, and that's okay. We're going to stay behind them. They often don't travel for long distances down the road. Maybe they're just trying to get to another field or the next farm. So if we're patient, we can wait. Now, of course, if we do have the opportunity to pass, just as we see here, now here might not be an opportunity to pass. I think this is an oncoming car. He's got the slow moving sign. We could pass him, I guess, here because he is actually off to the shoulder of the road. Now, if he was moved over here, we wouldn't have time to pass until, of course, the way was clear by an increased distance. Let's kind of touch a little bit on animals here. Why do pets and other domestic animals present special problems to drivers? Their size and quick movement. So here, this looks like a pretty safe package. We have an adult with a leashed dog. Now, different things could happen. The dog could struggle and get off the leash. The pedestrian could not pay attention and maybe try to cross the road. But of all situations possible with animals, this one would probably be one of the safest where we're just going to observe and glance, notice they're there, and continue on. It's been estimated that 1.5 million deer alone are killed annually in the US by motor vehicles. These little guys are kind of a problem out on the roadway. One, they're not little, as my comment just said. They're actually big, so they do cause some damage. Potentially to the driver or to the car. It's tough at night with our high beam headlights. We actually blind them a little bit, so they tend to be out in the road and kind of stuck. In reality, they're just trying to usually get from food source to food source, or maybe food source to bedding area. So they're on a mission, and you are in the way of their mission a lot of times, I like to say. So what we want to do is we don't need to be super perseverance on looking right or left, but we do want to make sure as we're driving along the road, one, if we're in rural areas, we're paying extra attention that deer might have the potential to come running out. We also want to make sure we're looking in the distance to see, and we want to anticipate that that deer is always going to want to try to go across the roadway, whether left to right or right to left. So if we see one on the side, we don't want to just anticipate, oh, they're not going to move. They tend to get a little scared of the noise of the vehicle, so they tend to actually run into the vehicle or towards the vehicle, which seems a little strange. If we were scared, we would run away, but deer tend to run too. So just be aware, those that are working with you for training, they'll probably talk a little bit more about deer, and maybe they have an experience or two that they'll talk about. So I will leave that to them, but I just wanted you to know that if we see deer, maybe we slow a little bit. We should hold on to the steering wheel, and unfortunately, this sounds terrible. We should do our best to maintain straight position, which may mean hitting the deer. Now, we always know that's not the best, but the last thing we want to do is veer and swerve, as it could cause an accident with oncoming traffic or potentially cause us to come off the roadway and have an accident. So it's tough with deer. Maybe talk to your behind the wheel instructor on what they recommend with deer and what they do, but I wanted to bring it to your attention in this unit. Oops, I apologize. I keep clicking different buttons here today. We're going to just quickly touch on passenger and freight trains. Passenger trains carry people to and from a location, and freight trains carry material to and from a location. This is likely an Amtrak train, and if you happen to be in the Kalamazoo area, the Amtrak train comes through frequently. There is a train station there, and they stop. Also in the Battle Creek area. I am from Lansing just for work, so I'm not very familiar with all the train areas and train depots, but I know in Kalamazoo they're a frequent thing. How much does a train weigh? That's kind of neat information to know. A typical locomotive weighs 200 tons. Add 100 rail cars to the locomotive and the train can weigh approximately 6,000 tons. That's 12 million pounds. That's a lot when you're talking a vehicle versus a train situation. So let's talk a little bit. This means railroad crossing is right now. You are right close to the tracks and they're right here. This is, you'll usually see these flashing back and forth to give knowledge that a train is approaching. Here, you want to stop driving when you see the train. Never drive over a railroad crossing when a train is approaching, as it can create an illusion that is moving slower than you think. Remain patient. We want to stop behind the railroad crossing. We don't want to come up here. If it shows Crossbucks in a minute, we'll show that. But here, it's basically just stop line. And we want to stop back enough to allow the train to move through without causing an issue. Staying alert. These are the Crossbucks as I'm talking about. They're showing I'm going up and down. These are positioned usually right about where the sign is, and they will go down to keep you back at the stop line as well. Now, this is usually more in a city area than a rural area like we just shown, so potentially why that area didn't have Crossbucks. All right. We want to always make sure that the track is clear. So we want to look left and right at every railroad crossing as we're approaching and preparing to come over. Trains may run after hours as well as during scheduled hours. Basically, trains do not have a good regulated schedule for you to say, oh, this train is coming at this specific time and there won't be one. When they roll through, and we have to address their timing. We want to slow down as we're approaching any railroad crossing. If the gates are down and the warning lights are flashing, we want to stop and wait until the gates go up. We do not want to try to beat those gates, and we are talking about these gates right here. Stop no closer than 15 feet from the railroad crossing when a train is approaching. If the crossing is equipped with the flashing red lights, they are activated. Do not attempt to cross the tracks. They often, if they're working correctly, they will only go down and close off the intersection short moments before the train comes through. So don't think because the crossbucks are down, you have a lot of time to go around and come on the other side. They are often quicker than that. If you find a malfunctioning railroad crossing, there is a number on this pole here. Usually it'll be down here that says for issues with the train, please call this number. And you could call that number if there's an issue with the crossbucks, or if your car broke down on the train tracks, you definitely would want to get out of the car and make sure you're safe, but it can happen. And I think I'm going to get that in just a moment here. Here is always wait for the vehicle ahead to clear the tracks so that you're not stuck on the tracks. Many times when I'm educating in Kalamazoo, I will watch individuals stop on the train tracks in the downtown area thinking that there's no train that goes through, when in actuality daily there's several trains that go through that area, and so they're increasing their risk of danger by parking on the tracks here where the train is going. Check in both directions after a train has passed. You want to make sure that there are no secondary trains, nothing ever following up behind. Usually the crossbuck should stay down. The light should remain flashing if there's any more reason for the tracks to be closed off. However, there can be errors, so you always want to double check. Just look left and right, make sure the tracks are clear. Here, they're going to tell you that there's 3 tracks. You don't want to assume that all 3 tracks are clear. You want to look, make sure each set of tracks is clear and ready for you to go. So if you just watched one train go through and think, oh my goodness, I can go out next, please triple check and make sure that all lanes are clear. And here is that sign to report an emergency or problem. Now, this isn't the number, so you don't need to write it down for every train area, but this is a number you can call for this particular area. And so it would tell if you had a train situation. So here, this has happened before in the past. I have actually witnessed a semi truck getting stuck on the train tracks and not having the ability to move. So if your vehicle for some reason becomes disabled on the tracks, you want to exit out of your vehicle and stand a good decent way back. If a train is coming and approaching, it will push a parked car out of the way with no issues. So do not sit in there thinking that you'll be okay in a parked car if a train is coming. That again is if your car got stranded on the train tracks for some reason or another. Now I'm just going to take a peek on other roadway users. I didn't load up those PowerPoints just yet, so we're going to kind of check. Here we have motorhomes, plow trucks, scooters, excuse me, I took a drink, scooters, and segways, these are called. So, and there's more, police vehicles, trolley carts, bicycle carts, and little fun city carts. Okay, well, and here's just a funny sign. And well, of course, we got different types of vehicles. So this is just showing different types of vehicles here. We're going to talk a little bit about law enforcement, what we do with them. So that's why we're discussing about getting pulled over. Since it's pretty likely you'll be pulled over someday, you may need to know what your responsibilities are. Now, just letting you know, I am reading off the PowerPoint information, and that's a very rough comment. Hopefully, we have trained you to drive safely and appropriately, and you don't get pulled over. So I think the statement should really say, if a situation happens where you get pulled over, what are your responsibilities? What to do and not to do when stopped on the roadside? How to minimize your risk for yourself and safeties of others? Your responsibility about how the police law enforcement officer works. What might be going through their mind? What's their perspective? Maybe somewhat anxious or nervous. Maybe on high alert because of some other nearby event. Maybe on the edge a bit because they just finished working a crash where someone was injured. But it's the LEO's job to enforce the laws of the road. They want to go home just like you tonight. So if you get pulled over, after you see the flashing lights behind you, your first step is to pull over to the side of the road. So you would communicate, you would pull over to the side and give a good stop. That lets them know that you are ready. You see them, you're pulling over. You're going to safely pull over and stop, let the officer get out of the lane as well, and put your hands on the steering wheel. Okay. Now that you're pulled over in a safe place, what should you do next? Put the vehicle in park, take your foot off the brake. Otherwise, it might look like you're about to drive away. Remain in the vehicle. Do not get out unless the operating officer asks you to. Turn the radio down to 0, completely silent. Roll down your window all the way, not just part way. Keep the other windows up. Keep your safety belt fastened. You don't want it to look like you're not wearing it. As the officer approaches, it might be a minute or two. He might be checking information out on his computer, trying to figure out if there's any background on you. They may have to radio dispatch and tell them what they're doing and prepare to get out. Just a minute. So we're gonna kind of move down here. What do we do with our hands? One is we want to keep them on the steering wheel. Used to be many years ago, first thing we would do if we got pulled over is we knew that the officer was going to ask for license and registration. So we were leaning and looking in the glove box. Now, because we've had so many crazy stories and things happening on the roadway, the officer may think that something bad is about to happen. So we want to show the officer our hands are okay by just leaving them on the steering wheel. What should you do if you have passengers with you? Ask them to put their hands on the dashboard, ask the back passengers to put their hands on the back seat, and to remain quiet. Conversation with the officer, you want to keep it short and concise, get the information out there, and do as needed to ensure the traffic stop is completed and you're able to go on your way. You're going to hand them your license. They will double check and make sure, as we said, that license is not yours. You don't own it. So that officer has the right to look at it and see who you are and get some information on you. So wrapping up the traffic stop, they may or may not come back with a ticket depending on what you're doing. They will likely hand your license and registration back and allow you to go. Okay. We'll do just a couple BAM videos here. Oh, here the car was about to enter the no zone. So here's your car and about entering the no zone. We know we don't want to do that. Here's going to be a driver going across the drawbridge. And these pictures are fast. Traffic light is red ahead and the road is slick from a recent rain. The road is also downhill. There's a truck strapped in front of you and police on your right. So we want to be careful. We want to slow down, make sure we don't hit him, and make sure the police officer is happy. Okay, so again, this was kind of a quick, fast overview of other users on the roadway. Again, chapter questions that you did in the beginning, I'm going to ask that you get them submitted by email, and then we'll return back with another unit. And this is ending chapter 10.